floor to the representative of China.
I thank President Molino for presiding over today's open debate. I also thank IMO Secretary General Dominguez, Panama Canal Authority CEO Vasquez, and Interpol Secretary General Urquiza for their briefings. Oceans and seas are vital to human survival and development. They are also a natural platform for inter-civilizational exchange. Each day, more than 100,000 commercial ships sail across the seas, carrying over 80% of global cargo trade. Oceans and seas are the arteries that convey the lifeblood for economic and social activities. Meanwhile, the current international landscape is marked by both change and turbulence, with traditional and non-traditional risks and challenges snowballing. Historical issues and current conflicts of interest intersect in a complex tangle in the context of which maritime security is drawing increasing attention. We must build broad-based consensus, take responsible actions, and work together to safeguard our blue home. I would like to offer 4 suggestions. First, international rule of law must be upheld and equity and justice defended. Without rule of law, peace across the seas is nigh impossible to attain. The UN Convention on the Law of the Sea is a comprehensive legal instrument governing oceans and seas. UNCLOS, other pertinent international treaties, and customary international law form the bedrock of the modern maritime order. We must firmly safeguard the international maritime order anchored in international law, interpret and apply UNCLOS in its entirety to the letter and in good faith, and say no to selective application thereof and double standards. Second, law enforcement cooperation must be strengthened in combating maritime criminality. Maritime crimes such as piracy, armed robbery at sea, drug and arms trafficking, and human trafficking continue to be perpetrated frequently and increasingly operate hand in glove with inter alia, land-based conflicts and instability, transnational organized crime, and terrorism financing. Countries must intensify efforts to combat these crimes and enhance law enforcement cooperation to ensure the safety of navigation. It is essential to assist the affected countries in building law enforcement capacity while respecting the sovereignty of coastal states and to address the root causes of instability through poverty reduction and sustainable development. Third, dialogue and consultation must be promoted to maintain peace and stability. We must effectively implement Security Council Resolution 2788, improve crisis communication, strengthen regional cooperation, and commit ourselves to the peaceful resolution of disputes. Historical disputes over maritime territories and rights should be resolved through friendly consultations between the directly concerned parties. China is concerned by the continuation and escalation of tensions in the Red Sea and urges calm and restraint among the parties. We call on the Houthis to desist from attacks on commercial vessels and to keep international waterways safe and secure. Fourth, global governance must be improved to address emerging challenges. We must uphold true multilateralism and support the UN's active role in jointly tackling such challenges as those concerning marine environmental protection, climate change, and rising sea levels. We should embrace the principles of openness, inclusiveness, and win-win cooperation to develop maritime infrastructure, promote the sustainable development and utilization of marine resources, and contribute to achieving the SDGs. It is also important to explore the use of cutting-edge technologies such as artificial intelligence, big data, and satellite remote sensing to enhance our ability to detect and respond to maritime security risks. President, international waterways are a vital lifeline for global trade. We take note of Mr. Vasquez's presentation we heard earlier and the pronouncement that you made about the neutrality of the Panama Canal. I'd like to emphasize that Panama has consistently and effectively manage the canal, making significant contributions to global shipping and trade. China has always respected the permanent neutrality of the canal and firmly supports Panama in safeguarding its sovereignty over the canal to ensure its openness and smooth operation. President, the blue planet humanity inhabits is not divided into standalone islands by the oceans and seas, but rather connected by them into a community with a shared future. As a major developing maritime country, China actively fulfills its obligations under UNCLOS and constructively participates in the global ocean governance process. China was among the first to sign and is actively advancing the ratification of the BBNJ agreement. We continue to provide maritime public goods to the international community, including hydrographic surveys, maritime navigation, weather forecasts, satellite communications, security, and medical support. To date, we have dispatched 47 escort task forces to the Gulf of Aden and the waters of Somalia. We actively resolve maritime differences through dialogue and negotiation and work with regional countries to maintain maritime peace and stability. China remains committed to working tirelessly with the rest of the international community to build a maritime community with a shared future. I thank you, President.
Thank you, President Molino, for convening this important debate today. I would also like to thank Secretary General Dominguez, CEO Vasquez Morales, and Secretary General Urquiza for your briefings today. The Panama Canal is one of the world's great instruments of commerce and economic security. It remains an historic engineering achievement, built at great cost by the United States and upheld by the United States security guarantees. The United States and Panama have been strong partners on maritime security. We support Panama's increasing vigilance in responding to malicious maritime cyber activities. The United States, however, remains concerned about China's outsized influence over the Panama Canal area, especially over critical infrastructure and port operations. China's expansive and unlawful maritime claims and aggressive actions demonstrate its threat to maritime security and commerce. The United States rejects such claims and stands with claimants in the face of China's provocative actions and intimidation. China's influence in the canal area is not just a risk to Panama and the United States, but rather a potential threat to global trade and security. Mr. President, Iran also poses a threat to maritime security through its support for the Houthis and other terrorist groups and its seizure of vessels transiting international waters. The United States calls for Iran to release the vessels it still holds, including the MSC Ares. We remind member states of their obligation to implement the UN embargo on the transfer of arms and related materiel to the Houthis. Iran and other countries continue to violate this embargo, providing the Houthis with the rockets and munitions, as well as the components and chemicals they use to rain attacks on commercial shipping in the Red Sea. Just last month, the Houthis attacked and sank 2 commercial vessels, resulting in loss of life, injury to sailors, and the capture of hostages. We condemn these attacks and call for the immediate release of all crew members. Mr. President, this Council must impose meaningful consequences for sanctions violations and seek additional ways to cut off the international funding and resources fueling the Houthi weapons programs. The United States has overwhelmingly borne the costs of defending freedom of navigation in the Red Sea. There must be more burden sharing in this effort, including financial support for the UN verification and inspection mechanism that is critical in enforcing the UN arms embargo. Mr. President, maritime sanctions are fundamental to the efforts of the Security Council to limit the flow of international funding and resources to the illicit DPRK nuclear and ballistic missile programs. Several months ago, independent researchers from the Open Source Center presented conclusive photographic evidence of commercial shipping transfers of coal and iron ore from the DPRK to other member states in violation of UN sanctions. The United States is working with our partners to ensure that 6 vessels involved in those transfers are designated in the 1718 committee. We urge all members of this council to swiftly support those designations. Mr. President, turning to best practices, the United States recognizes Interpol's efforts to improve real-time screening of illicit international travel and technological exchange between coastal authorities and regional organizations. The International Maritime Organization recently agreed to develop a cybersecurity code that will provide specific measures for ships and ports to counter cybersecurity threats. In addition, the IMO has taken steps to address shadow fleets that traffic oil and other sanctioned products and is developing measures to address the related problem of fraudulent ship registries. The Registry Information Sharing Compact, RISC, is another initiative that has quickly become an essential best practice in the maritime sector, providing flag states with unprecedented transparency and compliance assistance in combating registry hopping by vessels and shipping companies seeking to evade sanctions and other maritime regulations. We commend Panama, as well as the flag registries of Liberia and the Marshall Islands, for kick-starting the RISC initiative, and we strongly support the expansion of its membership and collaborative work. Mr. President, once again, the United States thanks Panama for this initiative and looks forward to continued engagement on efforts to counter emerging challenges to maritime security. I thank you.
We would like to thank today's briefers for providing their information. The challenges and threats at sea are becoming increasingly diverse in nature, some of them including piracy and the linkage between criminals and international terrorism indeed do fall under the remit of the Security Council. The proactive actions taken in line with its central role, including the adoption on the 16th of December 2008 of Resolution 1851 on establishing the contact group on piracy off the coast of Somalia, did broadly curb the phenomenon of piracy in the 21st century. Measures were also taken to strengthen the military and maritime and law enforcement capacity of a number of regional states, and dozens of pirates were detained and prosecuted. The Russian Federation has been actively involved in these efforts, and it provided its naval forces to escort civilian vessels and also participated in work of the relevant regional formats. However, of ongoing serious concern are instances of armed robbery at sea in the Gulf of Guinea. There have been a number of incidents, including Russian seafarers being taken hostage. In order to improve the military preparedness and technological equipment of the coast guards of the country of the region, we have expanded our financial assistance from the annual voluntary contributions of the Russian Federation to the UN Office for Drugs and Crime. As regards terrorism at sea, in pure terms, it is extremely rare. One such high-profile example of terrorist attacks over recent times is the explosion of the Russian gas pipeline Nord Stream 1 and 2 in the Baltic Sea in September 2022. This incident became possible, as we all know, in the context of the rabid anti-Russian stance of the previous American administration, headed up by Joe Biden, which undoubtedly created serious risk for international peace and security. Any of our attempts to initiate an independent international investigation of this criminal act or adopt measures through the Security Council were repeatedly blocked by its Western members. Once again, this makes us question the circumstances regarding the preparation and implementation of this terrorist attack. In support of their position, they, as we all recall, referred to their total faith in national investigations being conducted by Germany, Denmark, and Sweden. They expressed upstream their limitless belief that they would be effective and credible. As we know, the effectiveness of the investigations of Denmark and Sweden led to a zero result. The German authorities are still taking their time and are repeatedly refusing to provide substantive information about the investigation either to the Security Council or to the entire international community. This is fueling various speculation and absolutely improbable versions in the international media. However, whatever Berlin says in terms of artificially restraining the publication of the German investigation, the truth will out and the perpetrators will be located and punished. Mr. President, now moving to the issue of maritime security, we'd like to underscore that such matters do not come under the remit of the Security Council either. Such matters must be dealt with by the relevant international structures, in particular developing unified approaches to combat organised crime as a whole, including its maritime component, is the purview of the General Assembly and the ECOSOC subsidiary organs, in particular the Commission on Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice. Currently, there has been a good database with all the decisions of these organs on various aspects of countering transnational crime, and that has been set up. Also, a whole system of specialized organizations has been set up and is running smoothly. This includes Interpol, and the Secretariat, the Secretary General, is here today. The role of these organizations is to increase the effectiveness of international cooperation to respond to such threats. It's hard to overestimate the significance of bilateral cooperation and mutual legal assistance on criminal cases. Without this, it's not possible to tackle transnational crime seriously. It's very important for such a mechanism to function on a clear and predictable basis without politicization and double standards. As we are well aware, today there is a serious problem with this. The requests from relevant Russian authorities in most Western countries are not complied with, even in circumstances when this is clearly stipulated in the provisions of the relevant international treaties or the Security Council resolutions. This is done purely for political reasons. As a result, it is the transnational criminals who win. They enjoy complete impunity. In today's concept note, mention is made of climate change. We'd like to underscore that monitoring this and developing the response measures and adaptation measures also does not come under the remit of the Security Council. Specialized mechanisms have been set up and are running based on the relevant international legal instruments, primarily the UNFCCC of 1992. We deem attempts to use the environment as an excuse for strengthening security measures as unacceptable. We have to note that the topic of climate change is increasingly being taken hostage to different kinds of political speculation and speculative ideas that are neither backed up in theory nor practice. In contrast, the damage caused to maritime trade, freedom of navigation, and the sustainable global supply chain by unilateral coercive measures imposed by the West is very real indeed. This instrument is used by them to violate international law, to support their own domination, and to carry out unfair competition through non-economic means. Having stable and predictable maritime logistics is important for all countries, and for small island states and coastal developing states, this, in fact, is a matter of their very existence. Unfortunately, we're increasingly observing actions designed to create artificial barriers and threats in these relations. Unilateral, coercive measures are a priori unlawful, and using them contravenes international law. This fact does not prevent states who use UCMs to refer to attempts to circumvent these, and I reiterate, these absolutely illegal measures, to pin a label that a vessel belongs to a so-called shadow fleet. I'd like to underscore that this term has no legal backup. It is not transparent and is not international. In other words, it's nothing but arbitrariness, once again, from Western countries. They hide behind this to use any means to cling on to their domination in the world. In practice, such actions purely serve to complicate logistics and increase the costs of goods for consumers. All of this ultimately means that developing countries suffer the most. Mr. President, when we consider the issue of maritime security, we cannot fail to mention the actions of individual states to whip up tensions in regions often located thousands of nautical miles from their own borders. They are presented as naval operations to support freedom of navigation. However, in practice, we're talking about these same old provocations. Of particular danger are the cases of the infringement and encroachment by Western states of fundamental maritime freedoms, including freedom of maritime navigation and the rights to peaceful and transit passage. At the meeting of the Greek presidency in the Security Council in May, we recounted the egregious actions of the Estonian patrol vessel trying to take by force the tanker that was navigating in international waters. There were 2 attempts to seize the vessel from a helicopter, and then a naval motorboat of the Estonian Navy actually tried to ram the tanker. This comes under the same topic I mentioned today, that is not international legal in nature whatsoever, namely the so-called excuse to combat the shadow fleet. UNCLOS of 1982 contains an exhaustive list of situations where stopping a vessel is authorized that's flying under another flag, authorized for inspection. This list, neither that list nor the convention will have any mention of this so-called shadow fleet. The inviolability of maritime freedom and also the principle of the sole jurisdiction of a flag state regarding the vessel in international waters is key for stable and predictable functioning of the international maritime trade system. In this regard, the actions of Estonia and its European support group have created a dangerous precedent. If other states follow this example, then the global supply chain will be broken and maritime trade will cease. Using naval forces and resources of NATO countries for such illegal actions is a direct path to military escalation and will create new risks for maritime security. In conclusion, Mr. President, I'd like to touch on what was mentioned in the concept note, namely the initiative to set up an international body for maritime security. In our opinion, such efforts undertaken at the national level and also through the relevant regional and universal organizations are fully effective and sufficient. We would urge everyone to focus on improving them where necessary and not to complicate the context for their implementation inter alia through unlawful actions that I've already mentioned.